Like with most things, one of the best ways to get better at something is just by practicing over and over again. Today, I want to practice some UI, UX kind of stuff with CSS mostly, but we'll also be working with data. And as I was scrolling through this list that I found on UI Design Daily of just free projects that you can grab Figma files for, I saw this reviews container and I thought, hey, that looks kind of interesting. So you can see here, it's got reviews, it's got average reviews, a way to search them. And so this is what we're going to be building out in this project. All right, let's jump right in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris and welcome to Coding in Public. Well, here's the Figma file I downloaded for free once again, and you can grab the same download in the link in the description. What we're going to do is use React and just plain vanilla CSS to build this thing out. So what I'm going to do is start with creating a React application using Vite. So let me open up my terminal. All right, right over here, and let's go ahead and just do pm create Vite at latest, and I'll call this review card. Now, pm, if you're not familiar with that, it's just an alternative to npm. It's a little bit faster, so that's what I prefer to work with. And let's go ahead and just use JavaScript. That's fine. All right, so let's cd into review card like this, and then I'll pm install it. And finally, let me go ahead and open this up in my code editor, and I'll be right back with you. All right, I've got everything open in VS Code, and then I've got it in Chrome on the right here. Let's go ahead and open up the local terminal, and I'll just do pm run dev. That should get the dev server up and running. And if I come over here and refresh, there's the default React Vite application. So let's go ahead and do a couple things before we start templating this out. Let's jump back over to the Figma file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to command click into here, and then let's just preview this and export this right here. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then the other icon is this one right here. So let's see, I need the whole thing right here. And again, I'm going to export this. Now let me drag both of those SVGs into my assets folder in VS Code. All right, I've gone ahead and done that. You can see here I've got search and star, and I'm just going to grab this right here and copy this out because whenever I work with SVGs, if it's just one or two, I'll just use like a GUI editor like this by Jake Archibald, where you can run it through SVGO, and that will minify it a little bit. So that's what I typically do. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that here. So I'll copy this out. You can see I saved a little bit of space. I'll do the same thing with the search, and I'll have a link to this in the description if you want. You can open an SVG, or I just paste the markup. That works just as fine. Grab all this, paste it back in. And so they're both a little bit smaller. All right, so now that I've got that set, let's close this down. Let's jump back over here. Let me jump over here and kind of just take note of what we need. So we're going to need several things. We'll need colors, obviously. And you can see here, if I were to select everything with Command A, I get a whole list of colors right here. So what I'm going to do is actually copy all of these out because I'll need those. And then what we'll do is just look at the different font sizes we need as well. So right here, you can see that this one, if I finally click into it, we've got 34 here. Right over here is 14. This one is 26. This one here is 16, 16, 16, 16, and 16. So we've got basically three different sizes, or four different sizes, because I guess this one, 14, 26, 16, and then 34. So four different font sizes. What I'm going to do is kind of wait till we get to each of those sections to template those out, but just so I know, I can kind of set my base at 16 and whatever this line height happens to be for all of these. So let's start with the colors and let's kind of manipulate our CSS and go from there. So back over here, let's go ahead and open up the main.jsx file. Here's where everything's happening in this index.css file right here. I'm not sure why these are marked as post CSS, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and kill all of this. I'm going to do a few basic things after I kind of reset this app right here. So I don't need any of this stuff. Let's get rid of that. I don't think I'm going to use any state in this application. And let's go ahead and grab everything out of this app so that it looks blank and empty. Eventually, I'm going to rename this to card because that's really the only thing we've got in the application. So for now, I'll just save that and everything should disappear. This can just go goodbye. I don't need this anymore. I'm just going to do everything in the single index.css file. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the very basic clear where I just take everything and set it to border box sizing border box, and then the margin and padding to 0 because I like to let the parents kind of control the spacing of the children. Next, I'm going to go ahead and declare a root component. And here's where we're going to have several variables we'll use throughout. So I'm going to have some for fonts, I know. I'll also have some for those colors. And I'll just show you how I like to do it. This whole process, by the way, this whole video is essentially much more like just how I would typically code stuff out. So it's less maybe polished than some of my videos, but hopefully more realistic to how I actually code. Let me come down here. I'm seeing that this is saying it's post CSS. Let's change it to CSS just because I want that to look like CSS. All right, so let me come back over here, and I'm going to open up a clipboard manager I have called PasteBot. You don't have to have this, obviously, but just to kind of keep everything in order here, what I'm going to do is just copy each of these one after the other. Let's see, for some reason it's not letting me copy it there, so let me grab it here, and then let's come back and select everything, and I'll grab the rest of these. Okay, so these are the colors we're working with. Let's go ahead and add these as variables in our CSS. So back over this way. For now, I'm just going to paste these in like this, and we can name them here in a second. All right, so with all those set, let me go ahead and rearrange these a little bit. So I'll have kind of like the standard color and the muted color kind of below it. Let's do the same thing here. So even though this is white, I'm just going to go ahead and declare this as a variable in case I ever wanted to change it, and that way I can kind of adjust it. And then let's set these in decreasing value of brightness. So we'll start with the whitest and go down. And then I'll go ahead and give these names. So let's call this maybe dark, I guess. And then this can be muted. This one I'll call accent. And this one I'll call accent muted. Now for each of these, I'm just going to select all these with Command Option and the down arrow, and then I'll call these neutral. So neutral, and then I'll do 1 through 4. I have a little extension called Text Pastry that will just do that for me, 1 through 4. So there we go. All right, so this is just pulling in those colors. Now, in a moment here, I'm going to show you how I like to work with colors in CSS. So we'll get back around to that. But for now, let's work on fonts next. So if we come over here, I've got this font right here, which is Merriweather Black. And then all the rest of these, let's see, medium Poppins, semi-bold Poppins, semi-bold, bold, medium. All right, so medium, semi-bold, and bold for Poppins. And then what was this? Merriweather Black. So let's come back over here. I do have Google Fonts open. Let's go ahead and just grab Merriweather. All right, here we go. And I think I just need the bold or the black for this one. So I'll grab that. And then back to here, let's grab Poppins and grab this. So I think it was medium, semi-bold, and bold. All right, so with all those, I'm going to grab this right here, and let's go ahead and just copy this out. I'll open up my index.html file, and let's just do it, I don't know, I guess below the title here. Pull that in, and while we're here, we'll rename this to something like Reviews Card, or Review Card. How about that? Okay, so now we've got those being loaded properly. Let's go ahead and grab these rules here and apply them here as well. So when I have multiple different fonts, I usually like to apply them like font heading or something like that, and then I will use that variable to set kind of which family I'm going to be using. So in this case, my font heading would be the Merriweather, and then here, let's call this like font body, and that will be Poppins, and then I can use that below. So let's go ahead and do that next. I'll grab my body here and do just kind of a couple basic things. I want my font family here to be my var font body, which is that one we just set up. And let me pull this over here and jump back over this way. All right, a couple other things here. I know I'm going to want my background color. And if I come back over this way, let's just figure out what this background color is. Looks like it's my E5. All right, so I don't even have that on here. How about that? All right, so let's maybe add another one. We'll call this 5 right here. And we'll call this 4. And we'll call it E5. All right, maybe that was just the background of the Figma. I don't know, but I'll go ahead and use that as well. So let's come in here and call this var and point to my neutral of 4, right? Yeah. Okay, so there we go. So we'll add some other things as we go. I do know that I'm going to want the background or the color of the text to all be that dark color because as I recall, except for this, they all are that dark color. And I think the button as well. So we'll say color and then var. Here I want my dark. All right, next, let's go ahead and place everything in the center. And just so we can actually see it doing something, let me go ahead and add just, I don't know, like an H1 that says hi or something. That way we can make sure that everything is working properly. So I'll say display of grid. So I usually use grid for these kinds of things, and then I'll place items in the center. Now next, we want my font size to be 16 pixels. That was kind of the default we saw on the cards. And if I wanted to know exactly what this would be like, I grab this here and I can look at inspect and just figure out, looks like the line height is 24. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. So line height would be 24 pixels. So with something like this, usually I would have these as variables and then kind of interpolate them down below. But I think because we're trying to get like pixel perfect here, I want to go ahead and just use the exact pixels, and I'll just use them for each of the things so we can be a little faster in copying stuff over. All right, finally, because I do want this to be in the center, kind of like this is here, let's go ahead and just add some arbitrary padding. So let's do like 80 pixels or something. So we've got some room all the way around. And this isn't really supposed to be a responsive design. At least they haven't given me anything responsive. So we're just trying to focus on making it look like how it does right there. Okay, so now that we've got that set, let's go ahead and add some of our HTML, our JSX here, and that will allow us to template this out the way we need to. So if I jump over this way, we'll actually have something to work with CSS. I'm going to open up that paste palette again. And for now, I'm just going to hard code those values in. We'll get around to changing those in a second. Reviews, let's see, we'll go 106. Actually, we might go ahead and template that out to start with, the actual data. Yeah, all right. So let's come back over this way, and right inside here, let's start. So I'm going to put all of this in a header tag, and let's just leave it like that. And then this will be an H2 that will say what others think about the product. Below here, I'll have a div with the class of summary. And if I remember right, this is kind of its own little section over here. So we'll have that kind of all wrapped together, but that top section that has the star and the number, I'll have in its own div. That will be an image, and we'll grab the source to that in just a second. And then I think I'll just put the other thing in a span, the actual amount, which in this case will just be 4.8 to start with. Now below here, but inside of that div for summary, I'm going to have a paragraph tag with average customer rating. All right, let's go ahead and get this image in here before we do anything else. So up top here, I'm going to import, what do we call that, star from, let's go to my assets, and do I have like a star.svg maybe? And let's pull this in right here. All right, there we go. And I guess if I want them to know what this is for screen readers and stuff like that, I should say star here. All right, I think that is set and ready to go. Let's go ahead and look back over here. We've got this input section as well. Now, technically, I'd probably want this to be a form so it could submit to the page and basically do a query based on the input here. So I think below this header, let's go ahead and just have a form with the class name of search. And for now, I'm going to remove the action and come inside here. And the very first thing I have is that magnifying glass, which actually I think I want to be a button. So let me go ahead and do that. And I'm trying to think, maybe I should make that semantically after what you enter. So let's actually have the input first, and this will be a type of search. And then below here is where we'll have a button. And this needs to be a type of submit, which is the default anyhow, but it's always good to identify these officially. This is going to have an image in here that will be a search icon. And if I save this, it's going to mess it up. Let's leave the alt alone right now because they shouldn't really need to know that it's a search icon as long as this has an ARIA label on it. So we could say ARIA label like run search, something like that. So let's come up top here and grab both of these, and I think I called that search like that. So hopefully that'll work. Yeah, there we go. We'll need to reorder these in the CSS, but semantically, I'd want them to select the input first. All right, other things I might want to do in this search would be I need to give it a name probably, like review search, and then I'll give it the same ID, review search, just in case I need that for some reason. I don't think I will in this project, but I'll come in here for a placeholder, and let's add that next bit of text, search topics and reviews. Okay, so we'll get around to styling that in a second, but the next thing we need to do is outside of the form, below we need to have our review section. So all of this right here, so I've got reviews, and then the stars, and the button. So what I'll do is probably just very lightly template this out, jump down to the button, and then we'll kind of go from there. So let's come back over here, and let's have this section be called reviews. And then I'll have just a paragraph with a strong tag that says reviews. Below this, I will have reviews container. And for now, I guess let's just like put a random value there. All right, so I know I've got something there. And then below this, finally, I want to have a button. And this will be a type of button. And I would probably have some kind of like on-click handler eventually, but in this case, I don't think I'll need that. The other thing is write a review. All right, so write a review. Is that capitalized? Let's check. No. All right. Let's go ahead and give this a class just so we can style it, and I'll give it a class name of button. Now, I actually want to create the data for this and use that properly, kind of like if we were really loading that data. So for now, I think I'm going to just leave this alone, and let's jump back to the CSS and kind of do a lot of these other basic things, and then we'll use that review section as kind of the end and final section of this product. So let's come back over to the CSS. The next thing I want to do is style out that card. So I gave it a class of card, and here I want to do background color, and let's just double check what this is. So it's my F8 one. So up here, that would be neutral 2. So var of neutral 2. We're going to change that around in just a second because I want to show you a couple other things about how I use color like I mentioned before. Now with this inspect selected, you can see that I actually get a lot of CSS written out for me. Now, I think some of this is kind of bad CSS, so I'm not going to use all of it, but there's no harm in using some of it here. So let's get rid of this. I'm not going to set a height. I think I will go ahead and set a max width on here. So max width there, position absolute, no. Gap, no. Padding, actually, yeah, let's keep the gap and padding. However, rather than doing a flex here, let's just do display of grid, and then I don't have to do any directional column things or anything like that. Okay, so it's already looking great, and you see the box shadow here is working well, but here's where I want to actually start messing with colors. And so we're going to change a lot of what we've done already, just to show you kind of how I like to work with colors and why I like to work with them that way. So you can see here that this color is basically my dark color, but it just has an opacity on it here of 0.1. Now what I like to be able to do is have a little more flexibility when I'm writing my CSS. Since I'm already referencing variables, what I like to do is change these to HSL values, and then I can apply those kinds of opacities as I get going. So the way I would do that is come back up here, and kind of the quickest way in VS Code is just to select these and then click this top banner, and it switches them to HSL, which is the next kind of iteration of the types of colors you can select. All right, so I've done that all, except now I actually want to strip out the HSL, and I'll explain why in a second, but let me grab all these with Command, Shift, and L, and I'm going to delete all the HSL itself. Now let's jump to the end and remove that final parentheses, and then we can either leave these commas or remove them depending on the syntax we're using, but I'm just going to go ahead and Command D to grab all those and get rid of those as well. Now as soon as I save this, everything should break because this is not HSL, it's just random numbers. However, if I wrap each of these vars right here, I guess these color vars, here and here, I'm going to select both of those with Command D and do HSL like that and wrap around. Now it should return some of those colors to me. Now, why would I do it this way? Well, like I said, it gives me more flexibility as I build out the cards themselves. So now if I come in here, I can just select HSL and I use my dark, and then now I can just do a /.1 and it should look the exact same. So I have opacity kind of baked in whenever I want to change this. It's real easy to work with. The only difference is I have to add a HSL as a wrapper around my variable. And I have a little shortcut on my machine that I use, raycast, which is like a spotlight replacement to do. You just do comma, HSL, and then basically drops your cursor right there, and I can type in dark or whatever it happens to be. So that's how I like working with colors, and that's why I like working with them that way. Now, I do have this kind of background card. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be part of the design or not, but let's go ahead and just do it. You can see it's 64 and 67 as far as its distance. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Let's see. I think the easiest way is going to be to make this a position of relative. And then let's just use the card before pseudo element. So card before. And here, first of all, we need some content. And so that will be nothing. And then position will be absolute. And then if I remember right, it's left of, was it negative 68 maybe pixels, and then top of negative 64 pixels. So let's just double check this, 67 and 64, so close. All right, 67 right over here. Now I want this to be a background color, and here my HSL will be my neutral of 1. That was the white color if I remember correctly. Now I need to set the width to be 100% and the height to be 100%. There we go. And then let's get it behind everything. So z-index will be -1. And then the border radius should be the exact same, right? So let's copy this down and just drop it, I don't know, right there. Okay, so there we go. It's a little hard to see the difference, but I think that's the same as here. All right, so we're set and ready to go. Now, when it comes to here, obviously this is going to only be taking up so much space. You can see I've got a gap here. This whole section here, I forget what we call this. I think this is just our header. You can see it gives us some basic stuff here. So maybe let's go ahead and use this. I think the only thing I would use is the gap. So let me grab that, and we'll come back below here and grab our header. And this will be display of flex and flex wrap of wrap, because even though it's not supposed to be responsive, or they didn't give me a responsive thing, at some point I want to actually set out some kind of wrapping ability. I will have a gap of 80 here, so these things are spaced apart by 80. Now let's go ahead and grab the header, and we'll grab the H2 inside of here. And here is where we'll use our other font family. This is the only place it's used, but I'll go ahead and just select it right here. And that way, if I change those up top, it will change anywhere throughout my document. The font weight, actually, let's just go check it. All right, so if I select this and I go under inspect, it should give me, again, a lot of this kind of stuff. So let me go ahead and grab this. The color we're going to select ourselves. Already did that. Font style normal. I don't think we need that because that's the default. Now the other thing I'm going to want to do is set a max width on here, and maybe I do this under a media query normally, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, so I'm going to actually select something like 15 characters as the largest it can be. So I'll say max width will be 15 characters. How about that? Let's see, I guess that needs to be a little bit smaller. 13 characters, maybe the spaces don't matter, I think. Okay, so we've got the header, we've got the H2. Let's now work on the other section, which we called summary. All right, so summary right here. Here I kind of want the same thing where I'm going to set a max width based on however many characters these are. Looks like about 18, something like that. So we'll say max width of 18 characters. This is some of the hard thing about working with like design files is they're designing it for a single view or sometimes 2 or 3 views, but you've got to work for every possible screen size. So sometimes you have to make a call of exactly how you're going to set this up. But in this case, we're just going after as much as we can of like pixel perfect accuracy. So I'm not going to try to be too particular about how this would scale and just focus on the brief. All right. So text align here will be center, and then the background, I think it's my white color, right? Yeah. So let's actually just grab all this and see if there's anything of value here. Sure, some of this stuff will be of value, so let's grab this. I will change around some of this because I like to use grid instead of changing the direction column and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get rid of that. Padding 17, gap is fine. Width and height, I'm not going to set those manually. Background and border color. So for both of these, I'm going to select them with Command D, and we'll do HSL, and this will be neutral 1. All right, back shadow, you can see it's 0.08 this time, but same basic thing. So I can come in here and grab my HSL and do dark /0.08. Okay, so I think that should work then, how that's supposed to be set up. Now, I want these to be next to each other, which means there's a couple different ways I can do this. But probably the easiest way is just to option click both of these, and inside here say flex 1, 1, and 0%. That way they try to share all the space and are always right next to each other. Now, eventually, you'd have to have some kind of media query to determine when they snap down, but I think that should work for the most part. Let's give this a little bit more room. All right, now, I did want all these things in the middle, and I don't think I ever did display grid. Oh, that's for the cart. So here I need to do a min height of 100 view height. All right, so with that said, I think this is mostly done. We've got a little bit of styling left to do over here. So if I remember correctly, this was, let's see, 26 and 39. And this was my 14 and 21. So we've got a couple kind of oddities with this. Let's go ahead. This is a section itself, and it looks like it's got some gap here of 8 pixels. So let's go ahead and use that. And again, I'm just going to use a lot of that inspect to make it a little bit quicker for us. So down here, we're just going to grab the div inside of summary. We'll say display a flex and align items center. And then we'll set a gap of 8 pixels that we copied over. Now I do need to make sure this summary is not a line item center, but place item center. There we go. All right, so with that said, I think now we just need to take the summary, the div, and the span inside of that and change the font weight. Actually, let's copy some of this stuff over. So I've got this right here. Let's select this, grab all of this. Still using pop-ins. Color should be fine. Let's drop all that in. All right, great. Let's now grab the summary and grab the paragraph inside of that. And once again, jump over here, Command click it, and grab all of this. Font weight 500, which I think is my default anyhow. So like that, yeah. All right, so let's come down here and give ourselves a little bit more space. And now let's work on this form area. If I remember correctly, we changed this to, or gave it a class of search. So let's start with that. So search. And here I know I want this to be display flex, and I know I want to align the items center. And I know the background color here needs to be my HSL of neutral 1. Now when it comes to the other properties, let's again come over here and select whatever we can. So padding and gap, those will both be helpful. And border radius, so let's grab all those. And I'll just delete the ones I don't need. So let's drop these in here, save it, get rid of this. Already set a background color, don't need that again. Okay, cool. Now, I do need to change the order of those things. So maybe the next thing to do would be to grab my search and take my type of submit. So that would be the actual button. For now, I'm just going to set my order to, can I do like -1? Yeah, there we go. So 0 is the default, so anything before that, we'll switch it over this way, but still this would select first and then this. All right, so if you're tabbing through it, that would be the right order because you don't need to submit something that you haven't even entered anything for. Now, before we get too distracted with the button though, let's come back up and grab the search, and then let's go ahead and just use another selector for the type, which would be the type of search. So this is the actual search input field. And I know I want this to be a width of 100%, so it stretches all the way across. The easiest way to inherit everything from the font is just to say font inherit. And then let's go ahead and add a border of none, so we get rid of that border. Now for the padding, I'm trying to think if they would have given me anything over here. I don't think so, but if I click inside here, that's going to be too tightly connected to all that. So I think I'm going to actually want a little bit of padding here. So let's maybe add some padding, just like, I don't know, 5 pixels. So we might change that in a little bit, but let's see, they don't have any way to show what happens when you click in here, but I'd want to show some kind of focus state. So I think what I'm actually going to do is add a border. So I'll do border bottom here, 2 pixels, solid. Let's just do like neutral 1. Neutral 1, is that what I got? Yeah. So I want it to be the same color, white, which means maybe let's take 5 pixels and then 2 pixels off the bottom. So this plus, actually let's do 3. So that should be the same spacing all the way around, but I'll have a border bottom that's right now essentially transparent that I'll then transition to like maybe the dark color when I need to. So speaking of that, let's do transition on border color. We'll do like 0.2 seconds. Is there a cubic Bezier curve? Sure there is. Let's use one of those. All right, so let's copy this down now. And I'm going to go ahead and add on top of this a focus state. And for here, I want to make sure the outline itself is not visible. So the default outline I will set to transparent. However, I'm going to change that border color to my HSL of dark. And I guess I could add some opacity, but I think that should work. So I'll come in here and click. Yeah, so you see it nicely snap in there so you can tell that you're actually searching. For now, I'm just going to leave this alone because you can hit escape if you have a type of search and it will clear everything. You can also click this and it will clear everything. So since they didn't tell me how to do that, that's what I'm going to do. I do know that this color though needs to be changed, and I think, isn't that like my muted color? I'm pretty sure. So let's go ahead and grab this and copy this down. And this time I want to grab the pseudo element of placeholder. So placeholder here, I want to change my color, or yeah, just color itself to my muted. All right, so we're well on our way. I do want to work on this button a little bit right here. And let's go ahead and set the background color to transparent. And let's see. Yeah, it doesn't have anything. So let's do same thing with border. So border will be none. I do want the cursor to be pointer so that I actually get a little cursor if I go to click here. And then, let's see, it's an SVG inside of a button. So if I were to focus in on it, you can see it's not quite centered there. So easiest way is to display grid and place items in the center. Now when I select it, I would want some kind of like border radius. Is that okay? Let's change that a little bit. So let's say border radius, let's do like 5 pixels. I don't think they give you any kind of focus state, but I would want a focus state, so that's what I'm going to do. All right, so focus state, let's go ahead then and transition. And when we hover over it maybe, or focus on it, let's zoom it up a little bit just to make it more prominent, and then maybe add a little background like border to it or something. So I'm going to go ahead and transform for, let's do 0.2 seconds. Let's grab that same cubic Bezier curve. And I know in addition to transforming, I'm also going to want to add a box shadow. So we'll say box shadow. I just like to do this with buttons and things like that. I think it makes it look good. Not everyone will, and that's all right. But that's how I like to work with it. So let's go ahead and grab actually just this. I'm going to copy this down. What we're going to do is take the search type of submit. So inside the search, there's the type submit, and when I hover over it, then I want to go ahead and transform, and I want to scale it. So let's scale it like 1.1. So now if I come over here, it should just nicely zoom up. Yeah, there you go. I kind of like that. Next, let's look at the focus state. So let's say the focus, let's set this to an outline of transparent. And then let's go ahead and just do a little border on the focus visible state. So when you tab to something, this is the focus visible state, and here's where I'd want to have a box shadow. So let's do something like 0, 0, 0, and you're creating kind of rings around this button. So the first one would be the same color as whatever the background is, and that would be my neutral 1. Then you can do a comma and redeclare another one. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's do it for 5 pixels, so it'll be 3 pixels of border basically. So this will be the inner ring, and then the outer ring will stick out by 3 pixels, all right, all the way around. And this we could do muted, I guess, since that's the color of the icon and that. So let's see what happens if I do that. So now if I come over here and I tab, yeah, now you get this nice effect. So this is the hover state, this is the focus state, and I don't know, I kind of like that. Maybe I should also change this bottom border to be my muted color. Since everything else here is muted, let's go ahead and change it there. Okay, so I think that mostly takes care of the search area. At least I'm pretty happy with that. The next section is what we called reviews? Yeah, reviews. So let's go ahead and do that next. And we won't have too much to do here until we finish out the rest of the data. But for right now, I'm going to do display grid. And let's see, does it give me any kind of, yeah, gap of 16. Okay, that'll work. So let's come back over here and say gap of 16. Let's leave everything else alone until we finish this button. So we'll make that review section our very last thing. I gave this a class of button. And rather than trying to figure out what this is, let's just come over here and click. And for now, let's just grab all this. All right, I will probably get rid of some of this, but for now that should work. See, I don't really need display flex on any of this stuff, so I'm going to get rid of all this. And the gap, there's nothing to gap, so let's get rid of that as well. Height, width. So what did I actually need here? I guess just the padding the border radius in the background. So for here, I'm going to say dark. And I guess I also need to change around the color. So I'll say color, and this is going to be, what is this? My neutral 1 probably. Now, because it's a button, I also need to font inherit. Let's also set the border to none and the cursor to pointer. And then finally, there's a couple different ways because it's actually a grid child to set the width of this, but I'm going to set the max width here to fit content. All right, so it'll basically only take the room that it needs, and then it can wrap or break words if it needs to on smaller screens, but it shouldn't with write a review like that, but who knows. All right, now next, just like we didn't have a focus state over here, we don't really have one here, but I wouldn't mind having one. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. So let me come up top here and just steal some of the stuff we did before, which by definition, we're stealing our own stuff, which cannot be stealing. So let me add this in here, and we'll just do it on the box shadow, but that should be the same. I'm also going to go ahead and grab the hover. Let's see. How about this one right here? The focus visible state. We'll steal that as well. So let's say button on focus. I want the outline to be transparent. I know that. And then let's go ahead and set this on both the hover and the focus visible. So let's do a where selector here and grab both the hover and the focus visible. So with both of those or either of those, I'm going to change the box shadow to what we already had. So maybe let's change this to our dark, but I like that because it's really clear what you're doing. Maybe let's increase this a little bit. Let's take this to like 4 pixels and maybe 8 pixels just to make it a little bit more prominent. Yeah, all right. It kind of snaps out if you're focusing in on it or if you're hovering on it. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. The next thing though is we need to actually get our content in here. If I come back over here, you can see that we've got 106 5-star reviews, 32 4-star reviews, and nothing of the rest of these. So I don't want to have to create a JSON file like that by scratch. So let's go ahead and use Node and kind of template that out. So let's come back over here. I'm going to open up the sidebar. Let's just add a JS file that says like, I don't know, reviews.js, something like that. And then let's just create a little function called like create review, and we'll pass it a star value. And then let's go ahead and return from this. Let's return an object. And since it's an implicit return, I need to wrap it in parentheses. So it's an object here, and I know I'm going to need a few things on here. I probably want an ID since I'm mapping over these. So there is an actual API within JavaScript called crypto that will give us that. So we'll do generate random UUID, and then I'm going to want a star rating. So we'll say rating is however many stars I pass in. And then usually you'd probably have something like created at. So let's go ahead and add that. And this would be like new date. So whatever the epoch time is, since I'm going to be using Node to generate these, I think those would all be the same, but I guess normally you'd also have like a body, something like this was great or something. All right, you'd probably pass that in as well, but I think that should work for us. Now, let's see, and the easiest way to populate some kind of array would be to just declare it. So say reviews, and then let's use just a simple for loop and say let I equal 0, and we'll say as long as I is less than, what was it, 106, right? Yeah, okay. So as long as it's less than 106, then go ahead and iterate on I. And we just want to reviews.push, create review, and what I want is 5. All right, so we've done that. Let's see, we also need to do it for 4. So I'm going to move down here. So that was 32. So we'll say 32 times, give me a 4-star review, and then I don't need any more. So the reviews, by the time I get down here, should be populated with a bunch of 5-star reviews, 106 to be exact, and 32 4-star reviews. Now I simply need to write this to a file. And so let's go ahead and import that built-in module in Node called fs. So we'll import from fs. And then I'm going to fs.file, what is it? File write sync, I think. And I just need to pass it a file path. So this would be my src. Let's go ahead and create a data folder. Since it doesn't exist, it should create it for us. We'll call this reviews.json. And then I want to go ahead and json.stringify the reviews so that it's an actual JSON file like that. So in other words, it won't just be an object, a JavaScript object, it'll actually be true JSON. All right, so let me go ahead and kill the server, and then let's go ahead and just run node reviews.js. All right, it doesn't like us. Let's see, no such file or directory. So maybe I need to actually create a data file in here. So let's say data, and I think it should create the file for us. Let's try that again. Maybe. All right, so let me go ahead and close the sidebar. I will save it so it gets this formatting from Prettier, which is the extension I have doing that. And then you can see I've got an ID, I've got a rating of 5, and then all these. So that should all be working correctly now. And now we can basically just not worry about this. But when we get around to dynamically generating like a value like this and all the other values below, we might change this around just to kind of prove that the data is actually doing something. So let's come back to the app.js file. And where was our section? The reviews right here. So we had this container. This is where we need to go ahead and add additional or template out our reviews. In order to have access to those, though, I need to import them up top. So let's just import the whole file, and we'll call it reviews from, and then here I want to go to my data file into my reviews.json. Okay, so I should have access to this, and maybe let's actually just get a few variables with like total or something like this. We'll just set this to reviews.length. Yeah, I think that should work. So let me come in here, and just to make sure this is working, let's add like total right here. And I guess I need to get this server back up and running. So pm run dev should get that back up. Let's see, 138. Okay, so that should be correct, I think. Just thinking through the numbers we added. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that so we know it's actually pulling in correctly. Now with these reviews, what I need to do is come down here. We're going to probably need to write some helper functions eventually. But first of all, inside this reviews container, let's go ahead and just template out our reviews. And I guess now that I think about this, I really need to work through a list of like an array of 5 items. So let's come up here. And let's say like stars or something like this. And we'll set this to 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, and with that, I can now come down here and work through those instead. So let's do that. So this would be stars. We want to map over the stars, and we'll just call it like S or something. So for each of these, we're going to return this bit of JSX. First of all, I'll have a div with a class name of review. And inside here, let's just look through what we've got. So 2 items here. I think these are going to be spaced out in their own little container. Yeah. And then everything else is in a container of 8, a gap of 8. So we've got 1, 2, 3 things. So inside this review, let's have that star section be called like a rating. And here we'll have 2 things. We'll have the actual number, which I think is just like a bold version of this, right? Yeah, so a bold, but other than that, all the rest is the same. So we can just make this a strong tag. And here would just be S. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that happens to be. When I save, you see it starts to pull in. Next, we'll have an image, and this would be our star, which we should have already pulled in up top. So we should be good there. And I guess here we can say star as well. Now they will be big. So let's go ahead and come in here, 25. So let's set that a width of 25, and we'll do a height also of 25. Okay, so those are in there properly. Next to that is where we'll have the next element. In this case, I think we're going to make this a progress element. You could also do this like an input type of range, but in this case, because it's not like changeable, let's just leave it like that. And we're going to need to adjust some stuff. So like in here, we need to have a percentage, and then here we're going to need to set like a max. And this would actually be my total, right? So the maximum it's allowed to be. Looks like it's just kind of going back and forth. Nifty. All right, we don't want that. We actually want a value here. And for right now, let's do like 100 or something. So the max would be 138 or whatever that was. And right now we're setting the value to 100, but eventually we will select those depending on how our JSON file is read. Now below here, I will also have probably just a paragraph with the total number. So like for right now, let's just say 106 for each of those. And then we can style them and kind of get back around to it. So we've got a couple options. We could either get the data perfect or get the styling perfect and come back to the data. We've been working on data. Let's go back to the styling. I think that's what I'm going to do. So let's come up above the button. We'll go into the reviews container. And here this is going to be display grid, I would think. And there's some kind of spacing here, right? So it looks like 18 pixels. So let's do that. So the gap will be 18. Next, we've got the actual, what did we call that thing? Reviews container. So the review, I guess, right? Reviews and then, or review and then rating. So next we'll grab the review. So review, and then so I don't forget what it's called, let's go rating as well. So the review is the kind of the whole section right here. And we know that this should be display of flex because we want these to be side by side. Align items center so that vertically they are aligned up and down. And then finally, let's see, how much gap is here? That's right, 8. So gap of 8. Now the rating itself is this little section right here. So this again would be display of flex, and then I think the gap was smaller, wasn't it? Yeah, gap of 4. So let's grab this over this way, and we'll add this in as gap of 4. And I guess we also want this to be align items center. There we go. This is spaced out a little bit higher. I think that's okay. It just looks like maybe the font itself. Yeah, it looks like the font height itself has a little more spacing at the bottom. So I guess we can kind of manipulate that. So maybe we come in here with rating and look at the strong tag inside of that. And here I could set like the padding top to 3 pixels maybe. The hard thing is that's now going to add extra space. So a hack would be to say margin bottom would be -3 pixels. And then that doesn't add extra space to the kind of parent container. Now, you can see how these aren't aligned properly. And these ones are all aligned. So there's a couple different ways to do that, but I think it may be easiest just to set a min width on this, since I already know it's only going to be the values 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So I could set it something like 15, maybe even a little bit less than that. Trying not to add any space between those. And then let's go ahead and just text align these things center too, just so that the numbers look a little bit more lined up. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Okay, so now let's move on to the progress bar itself. So we'll grab the progress, and here I actually just want the appearance to be set to none because I think I'm going to just kind of do my own thing with this. So get rid of all the styling from the browser here, and let's set the border to none, and the width needs to be 100% so it stretches all the way across. Height, let's see what the height is. We got a height on this thing. It says 10 pixels. So let's try it, 10 pixels. All right, there we go. Next, let's set the border radius, because I know I need that. Did I have that over here? Border radius 13. Cool. All right, so that border radius is not showing, but I think it's actually because the internal sections that the browser sets out itself are kind of overflowing that. So let's say overflow hidden, and I think that should take care of that. Yeah. Okay, so now we've actually got a true border radius. All right, I had to actually look this one up because I didn't remember how this worked, but you can actually grab the value, and there's a few things called WebKit progress bar. There's also like an inner element and an outer element, but we can use these to set those colors. We'll set the background color, and let's come over this way. One of the dangers, the way I changed it from HSL to hex here, is now I don't ever know what any of these things are, so I'd have to actually click inside here and then figure out what the HSL is. It's 79, and then come all the way back up here. So what you might want to do is actually set these up to where you like comment out the, whatever the hex is over here. So that way you don't have to keep checking. So it looks like neutral 5 is I guess that was the stroke. So this is 93, which is neutral 3. So neutral 3 and neutral 5. Let's come all the way back down to my progress. And that means this is neutral 3 for the background color, and then we will have a border on it as well. And that border would be 1 pixel, probably, I'm guessing, solid, and then neutral 5. All right, so let me come over here and just double check. Yeah, 1 pixel. The other thing I'm going to want is to bring in this border radius, I'm pretty sure, to the same area. And then on top of the progress value, WebKit progress bar, you also need to add the Moz progress bar. And I think that should take care of any problems we might have. Next, I want to actually set the value itself. So I'll say progress, and then we'll grab the value, and we can use WebKit progress value. And here I actually want to layer this in over the top of the actual background bar. So I think I'm going to actually set this as position of absolute. And that means I need to come up here and make this position of relative. And this is the actual progress itself, so that I can pull that out and kind of do my own thing with it. Here, let's go ahead and inset this to 0 and then set a background color here. And this needs to be, I think we set that up as accent. There we go. We'll have a border radius here of 13 pixels because I'm assuming it's the same as everything else, except I can't spell. So let's grab this and drop it in here. And then if I come back over this way, you'll see that I do actually have a little border on it as well of this darker color, which was my accent muted, if I remember correctly. So we'll see border here, and this should be the same 1 pixel solid, and this will be my accent of muted. Now, the reason I did this absolute is because when I was playing around with this earlier, I realized that if I didn't do absolute, that it would be inside of the other border, and there's kind of a double border on all these sections, so I don't want that. All right, now over here, I'm seeing that this is not picking up the color I want.
2 hours later.
All right, I'm not seeing anything offhand, so right now let's not worry about that, and I'll come back and style that in a second. But I think we've at least got it basically set. This should just be our standard height and value for the font, so we should be good there. Now what I need to do is actually get this percentage in here, which maybe that's actually why this is messing up. I've got a value, so that's good, but we want to actually set this to the actual value of whatever this is. So what I need to figure out is basically how many items have a value of 5 stars, for instance. So if I could pass it a function and pass it the actual S, or in this case, the star itself, like 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever, and see how many of my reviews contain that, that would be the right way to go. So let's come all the way up top here and let's add in maybe a little helper function here. So let's call this like number of matching reviews. And we'll pass this a rating, or I guess a star value. How about that? And then I just want to return here reviews.reduce. Usually when you're trying to get to a single value, reduce is the right method. It takes in an ACC, which is the accumulator, or the thing that gets passed to each iteration, the total amount that gets passed each iteration. And then what I want to return here is at the very end a number. So if you're not familiar with reduce, it can be kind of confusing, but think about it like a map, except it's got some superpowers. One of those superpowers is I don't have to return an array. You see in the end here, I want to return a number. And you do that just by identifying after the loop what you want it to be. This right here is actually what starts as the accumulator. So when I first pass in this whole JSON object, which is what I'm eventually going to get out of here, when I pass it in, each time it loops through it, it's going to have access to 2 things instead of just one thing like a map. Although with a map, you get access to index and the array if you want. But in this case, what I get is the thing I'm looping through, the individual review, but I also get the accumulated value for all the loops combined at this point, which means during each loop, I need to actually return that ACC. What I want to do is only return it if it matches the rating that I've passed in. So what I'm going to say is if review dot rating, which was I think the property I gave it, if that equals the star I passed in. Let's maybe just make this rating so it's clear. So if the rating I pass in matches the reviews rating, then go ahead and return the ACC plus 1. So the first time through, it's going to look and say, hey, does this match 5 or 3 or whatever rating I passed in? If it does, then it will add 1 to this. Now, the next time it loops through, it's got access to that 1, because that's what's been updated, and the next review. If that review matches it, it will add it to it. If it doesn't, then I want to go ahead and make sure I still return the ACC. I just haven't changed it at all. So I guess this could technically be plus equal 1, but I think either way it should work the same way. So in the end, number of matching reviews should give me a total single value for however many reviews match that. So I'll come all the way back down here and change this value out right here. And here what I want is the number of matching reviews. And in this case, I'm going to pass it S, which again is like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever these things are, the stars. So now I've got 106 and this should be 32. Now this value still has not been updated. So I actually would want to take the same thing right here and add it in right here. Okay, so now I got 106 and 32. So it's adding those up correctly, which is exactly what I want. Now the next thing I need to do is actually calculate the percentage. The progress element itself is not going to show this. However, it does read out for screen readers exactly what percentage this progress bar is. So here we could do a little bit of math and take that same thing, the numbers of reviews, and then we're going to divide it by the total, right? The total amount that we have. And then we just have to multiply that times 100, and in the end, add a little percentage sign. And let's say I'm already working with JSX inside here, so I think I can just do this. And finally, I just need to move this curly bracket right here. Okay, so I think that's right. So what I've done is I've done math inside of here, and then when I'm done, I have a percentage sign on the end. All right, so technically if I come in here and I look inside here, this should give me a percentage of like 76 whatever percent. Now the way I did this, it's still kind of showing on 2 lines, so I don't love that. So let's go ahead and let's actually do this as some JavaScript inside of here. Then this whole thing needs to be in a template string, and at the end here, then I will add my percentage. So if I do that, let's look inside of here. Yeah, so now I got 76 point whatever percent. So we still got some styling things not quite being picked up, but the other thing before I fix that I want to do is fix this up here. So we can actually have a dynamic value up top. And now that we've done some of our little helper functions, we should be able to get that pretty easily. So 4.8 right here. What I want to know is the average per review. All right, so let's come back up here and make another helper function. And in this case, I'll say average review. I'll say reviews dot, and again, we want a single value. So let's just use the reduce. So I'll take the ACC and the review. In the end, I'm going to return something, and I want it to be 0 in the end. Now, it's just an implicit return because this can be a quick little one-liner because all I want is the ACC plus review.rating. And I guess this isn't really an average review. It's like total stars or something like that. So it's all the stars in a sense. And then I will divide that by my total to get my average review. So let's come back down this way, and let's go ahead and do some templating here. So here, let's take my total stars and divide it by my total. And that should give me something. All right, so it does, but it's really, really long. So let's see if we can't clean this up a bit. So what I'm going to do is take that, and the result of this right here, let's go ahead and wrap it back in parentheses. I can use something on a string called toLocaleString. This is just an API that lives within JavaScript, or that comes default. So I'm going to pass an undefined locale, so it can be based on the browser of whoever comes. But there's a second thing you can pass in, which is an options object. And here I can say I want the maximal fractional digits. I think this would be 1 maybe. Yeah, so it should say 4 point whatever. And if I said 2, that would give me 4.77. But in this case, I can just say 4.1, and it will do all that rounding for me. And it's still that full value as far as the data itself, but now it's actually rounded it so it looks like 4.8. All right, so that's mostly there. Before we do anything too much more, let's figure out what's going on here with this, the background of that, and that's changing. So I'll come back over here, and let me just double check I didn't mess up something. So yeah, I have progress, and I didn't spell it correctly. So progress here, here, and here. Sometimes taking a break really helps. There you go. All right. Now there's one other thing I'm thinking about UI-wise, and that is I've got this border is what this is showing up here. Even though there's nothing in here, the border is showing up. So there's a couple different ways we could fix that, but I think maybe the easiest way is just to be able to say left -2 pixels because it's 1 pixel border on either side. Now, if you'll notice real carefully, if I zoom way in, that means that it doesn't have a left-hand border. But I think I can deal with that. I think that's less distracting than having a little sliver there. There are a couple other ways you could deal with that as well, but I think that'll work for me. Now, before we're done, let me go ahead and pull this out, and let's just make sure that everything is properly responsive. If I come in here, I start searching for something, I hit tab, it should give me that search icon, or if I hit enter, you can see now I get this actual search param up top here. That's cool. Of course, you could store this in state, do that kind of stuff, but anyhow, we don't need to do that. Write a review, that is looking correct, but let's actually update our reviews right here to change this around. So let's change this to like, I don't know, 22. Let's add a couple more. So let's say there needs to be one for 3, and this could be, I don't know, 2. Maybe we have like 52 2s, and let's do, I don't know, 12 1s. All right, so let's kill this and now say node reviews.js, and that should run again, and then pm run dev, and right away we should see this update. Yeah, there we go. So we have a new dynamic average customer rating. We actually have these things dynamically generated as well. And I think that looks pretty close to the finished product. Let's come over here and over here. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. I hope that was a help, and I hope that was enjoyable to kind of watch me go through the process I would use. Of course, if you have any suggestions, let me know. Learning in public, doing this in public with you is a great way for me to learn, and so I'm always open to more suggestions. I'm never the expert and always a learner. Well, thanks so much for watching this. I will catch you in the next one. Happy coding.